Okay, we're recording, and I'm with Angela Haas. Angela was sent me a wonderful space opera piece, and you have but this is part of another project. You have your first book coming out in a little bit.
Yes.
How did it feel to put your first baby into the world?
It was scary. I had a moment of stage fright where the editor's like, "Are you good?" And I'm like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe I should, you know what? This is bothering me. I should probably change this character real quick." And they're like, "Angela, you got to stop."
I should rewrite these 7 scenes. I
It's
should
like,
just,
what if
yeah.
this sentence had these words here? And they were like, "Well, you've been through so much editing. No one's caring about this at this point." I had to let it go. I had to
It's super true.
They said, "You have stage fright and we're done with you." We're
This
putting
is
it
terrible.
out there.
It's really
Yeah.
funny. So it's with reviewers now.
Yes. So submitted to Kirkus and
Mm,
Clarion and Blue Ink have
nice.
sort of a double where they have a nice discounted package if you go with both of them.
Very
So
cool.
I did those three. I tried to book with Hidden Gems, but they're booking out in November.
Oh, wow.
I didn't feel like that was helpful right now.
Yeah,
So
that's big.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on getting your first
Thank
book in the
you.
world. That's
Thank
super
you.
exciting. Talk to me about the piece that we're going to look at. Is this a work in progress? Is this
It's book two. So I'm
okay?
trying to really fast track, well, not fast track, I mean, take time, but get book two churning and out there while we're still waiting for book one to publish. So there's not a lot of lag
Smart.
in between. So this is just book two. It's set up like the Avengers where, there's Iron Man's story and he connects to the larger Avengers world, Iron
Nice.
Man and Thor. So book two has some of the same universe and supporting characters and crew, but it's a different protagonist, different journey that
Okay.
will connect to the final big end game.
Nice. Which of these are any of these characters that we're going to talk? We've got Cal in this one and Zimmer. Are either of these characters in book one?
Cal is not,
Okay.
but Zimmer is.
Okay.
He is continuing from book one.
Nice. Is he a big character in book two, or is he just a side character in this scene?
He's a big character in book one, but you don't really know who he is.
Okay.
And then I used him more in book two to intro, like, okay, here's more about how my universe functions. And
Gotcha.
then he sort of fades away.
Okay.
So he's not as big, but he helps in this scene explain how things work.
Yeah, he's definitely world building in this scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely yeah. Um, so you had a question. You're in this book, you're flipping POV. You've got Cal, and then you've got, I'm assuming, Scout's POV.
Yes.
Is there another one too?
Yes. So from the villain side, there's General Lavella Law is one of my main characters through the series.
Okay.
She was in book one, now she's in book two,
Yeah.
and she's in the villain's world in book two, and she's gonna hope for redemption later, but we're gonna see things through her point of view.
Nice. Very cool. So at least three.
I always do three because I feel like I can tell the story from different angles. So I pick three each.
Nice. Okay. And so you had asked me before we started, you'd asked me in an email about inner thoughts and switching POV and how necessary they are. In this one, in the piece you sent me, I think you have maybe one line of inner thought for the 7 pages.
Yes, and because when I write, like, this is literally a word barf, and it's like, get words out.
Yeah.
And put them, because I'm more of an overthinker writer. I tend to I'll write a sentence and be like, let's research what kind of uniform this is. And I'll go down this rabbit hole of doing stupid research that it's not stupid in the way that all research is beneficial, but people aren't going to care what the characters are wearing, Angela. You need to just get it out.
I mean, some people might.
Yeah.
But you also need to just get it out.
I need to get out. This is draft one, and I tend to want things so perfect instead of just stream of consciousness, just write. So
Yeah.
the first layer is just writing. I'm just writing, and I kind of bookmark like maybe some inner thought here, and then I'll go back through as I, finish. And my part of my revisions is adding that extra layer of emotion and setting and more layers of
Sure.
other things. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have very much because I wasn't sure. B, I need to add that layer now, ready to
Okay.
go back and add that layer.
Which character has so you've got these 3 characters in POV. Which one? This is one is Cal's POV we're looking at.
Yeah.
Does Scout have a lot of inner thought?
Scout is the protagonist.
Yeah.
So she'll have, and she has a lot of inner thought because the theme of this book is like, what we think and do not say and how that gets us in trouble,
Okay.
up.
Then yeah, you got to have inner thought in the book. Yeah.
And so you're going to see a lot of Scout's inner thoughts where like, there's a scene later where Cal says, "What's wrong, Scout?" And she's like, they burst into this, inner thought of like, "What's wrong? What's wrong? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't know what's wrong with me. This, and this, and this." And then what she says is, "Nothing, I'm fine." So
Gotcha.
you're seeing like a lot of her inner thought. And what we're trying to transition is her from stop thinking so much and speaking up and telling people what her inner thoughts are. So
nice.
She's gonna have a lot of inner thoughts.
Okay. In the first, so Zimmer was in the first book, not Cal. The thing about inner thoughts. So here's the thing to answer your question of like, because you had 2 questions. One was, does every POV need to have inner thoughts if one POV has inner thoughts? And then how much inner thoughts per POV? So those are 2 different, like,
sure.
Well, they're 2 different answers. They're around the same question. So to answer the first one, the purpose of inner thought, like why are we putting inner thought in the thing itself, in the piece itself? Inner thought is all about shortcutting emotional resonance with the reader. So that's why it's so popular in romance, right? Like, because the reader is coming for an emotional experience. They're coming for an emotional journey. And inner thought gives you that, like, it removes the need to interpret what characters are thinking. It just like shoots it right into the reader's veins. Like, here's what she's thinking. Here's how she feels right here about what's going on. So it speeds up the process of getting your character's emotions and emotional changes to the reader. So it makes the book, if done well, it makes the book feel more intimate, right? Okay. At the same time, it removes some of the artfulness of the book. Not that it necessarily has to. You can have incredibly artful inner thought, but like in general, inner thought is about shortcutting the artfulness of needing to communicate characters' emotions through body language and through the like interaction with the world and getting like straight to it, right? So that's why it's super popular with readers that just like want to get to the point, want to get into that emotional exchange. So that being said, knowing like what inner thought's for, if you're writing with inner thought, you're appealing to a reader that wants that emotional directness with the character. So yes, you have to have it in every POV. You can't have it in one POV and not have it in another. I mean, you can. There's no rules, right? Like, you can do whatever you want, but you just have to know the POVs without inner thought are going to feel emotionally closed to your reader.
Right.
Where the POVs with inner thought are going to feel much more intimate. So if you're not doing that out of intention, then you need to be consistent across your POVs. They either all have inner thought or they don't have inner thought. Okay. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So how much inner thought do you need to have is actually part of your character voice. So if a character is very internal, meaning that they have this rich internal life where they're processing internally all the time, they're going to need a lot of inner thought, maybe even more inner thought than external vocalization, right? A character, talk to me about who Cal is. How do you understand Cal's personality?
I think Cal is, I mean, he's kind of a different person he's with Scout, but he's more, kind of answering the call of duty, doing what he needs to, what's right, kind of I don't want to say basic, but like no nonsense. Like I
was a
don't know.
basic bitch. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So kind of like a Captain America type. Like
Yeah. Like
yeah,
here's what we need to do, and we're gonna do it, and it's okay. You
noble,
know. Yeah.
sacrificing for the good
Yeah.
of the
If
mission.
this is what I need to do for my mission, I can put my own feelings aside and get through it. He's kind of like the calming
Okay,
force of he and Scout, like keeping Scout, centered a little bit.
gotcha. So he's
And
like the oak.
where she gets him to open up a little bit.
Okay.
Then,
So that transition you're talking about between like him and him and normal world and then him with Scout, because they're childhood friends, they've been together forever. There's like a deep intimacy. What you're expressing there is vulnerability, right? Like, so when he's around Scout, you're going to modulate his voice. You're going to shift his voice to sound more open and vulnerable. He's going to let some of his guard down and let some of his shield down. So let's talk about Cal's voice in this instance because he's with Zimmer. Now, is Zimmer a superior officer? Is Zimmer a friend? Like, how does their relationship work?
I mean, he's a friend. He's someone that he's, been on cruise with for a long time and just been a part of his since he was orphaned. Zimmer was almost, I wouldn't say a father figure, but part of like the village that helped raise him,
Gotcha. Okay.
kind of thing.
So there's not a lot. Are they in the military?
I mean, so the Sentinels, which is part of my universe, is sort of like the galactic, police military force that supports the superheroes in keeping peace in the universe, I would say. But I don't know if there's like, Cal has like a military rank, but Zimmer's just part of, I would say he's more
kind of a civilian working in the on the ship.
Exactly.
So I would say not in this book, because this is book 2. And if you did it in book 1, you can't start it in book 2. But in the future, when you look at space opera and you have a group like the Sentinels, think about military rank and how that changes how they address each other. I was surprised in this chapter because you call him Captain Cal Merritt, but then he's not calling anybody sir, and nobody's referring to him as sir, and there's no like distinguishing of rank between them, which in these military contexts is important. But that's not for this piece. That's for a future piece. So with this piece, with Cal having that like, Captain America style. So you're talking about somebody who's very confident and very self-assured, but also somebody who's very modest, and who doesn't like flaunt their confidence, and somebody who sees their operation as like focusing for the greater good. So there's things that you're doing with Cal's voice in that way that's really great. So for example, here I'm going to share my screen so we can see it together. Let's just look at Cal's first conversation here. So Cal rubs his temples and was about to lean up to the door when Captain Phineas Rex emerged from the office. I'll be taking the pygmy train out. Rex says this thing to Zimmer. Cal stood up, shook Rex's hand, right? Excellent, confident gesture, right? Like Cal standing up and putting himself forward, which expresses to me like, okay, he's confident enough to look this other guy in the eye. You know me, Captain, if you're not early, you're late. Now, there's a couple things I like about this being Cal's first utterance. Like one, it's demonstrating that like he's got that discipline and that rigor that you want in that like soldier mentality. Second, you're keeping his language tight, which is something you do with Cal. He never speaks more than a sentence or two at a time. Cal's not rambling. He's keeping that language short. So you've got like a sentence we call this his cadence, which is like how many sentences he has in an utterance and what kind of punctuation he's using. So Cal's using pretty tight sentences, mostly periods, which expresses confidence, right? Confident people express their opinion in these kind of declarations. So all of that's great with Cal. right? Like he's stating how he feels. He's not afraid to debate. He's not afraid to push back a little bit. It expresses that confidence, but at the same time, he's not disrespectful, right? Like he's not saying anything to anybody. He doesn't really make a lot of jokes, right? Which expresses that kind of like humble modesty, that if he was an arrogant, confident guy, there'd be a lot of like ribbing of other people. There'd be a lot of mocking other people, but he doesn't do that. Right. So kudos on lining Cal's voice up with your personality of Cal. So
thank you.
Talking about using inner thoughts for Cal's inner thoughts need to be him processing what's happening in the moment. Because the character you're describing is a character who focuses here and now. He's not a worrier and he's not anxious. So worrier and anxious people focus on the future and on outcomes and on consequences and on, oh my gosh, if this happens, then this, and if this happens, then this, right? Like if you had an anxious character, that's where I'd want their thoughts focused, like changing things over. You know what? I'm going to pause for 1 second. I have to deal with a kid real quick. This is life working from home. Give me 1 second.
No, it's totally
okay. Sorry about that. My daughter needed me to pick her up an hour early, and that can't happen. No, that doesn't. Yeah. Anyway,
life with teenagers.
There's the assumption that their life is the only life,
and that you don't do anything. By the way,
I don't have 2 jobs. I don't do this thing in my side time. Anyway, so let's go back to talking about Cal. So you don't want him like anxious or thinking about the future, right? Like you don't want his inner thoughts future focused. You also don't want his inner thoughts like questioning what went on in the past, right? So if Cal was somebody that's full of doubt, or if Cal was somebody that wasn't self-confident, who had self-esteem issues, Cal would be thinking about what had happened and how he was perceived in that way. That's not how you want Cal to come across, right? Like you want him this confident. But so Cal needs to be thinking about right here and right now and what's going on. So you start this opening with him sitting in a room by himself, waiting for a meeting to happen.
Yeah.
This is a great moment for inner thoughts.
Okay.
Right? Like he checks his smartwatch. Only a minute has passed since he last looked. He shifted the seat outside of Zimmer's office where he had been sitting for 5 minutes. Right here.
Okay.
I wonder what he's doing in there. Like, what's he doing in there?
Yeah. He'd probably be like, let's go. I'm here.
Yeah. He stretched his knee. Cal leaned forward to catch anything. He could take out a certain, but nothing meant anything. He checked his watch again. I wonder if he even knows I'm here.
Right.
Right. Or I would do the 2 minutes has passed and I come down like, I wonder if he even knows I'm here. But it's all about right now. Right. Like it's all about this conversation. So when you get down later into Cal's inner thoughts and they're talking about this role that Zimmer wants him to take. Like I'm just going to pick up at a random spot that I didn't edit so much. There we go. So Zimmer says, yeah, one of many. I've paired with Kate Walsh, her healer, and her daughter, Stella. They're safe on the Terra with a member of my staff who takes over when I need to be here. Cal says, this all sounds exhilarating, but I still don't know what this has to do with me. Yes, you do, Zimmer said. I would like you to be Scout's handler. So before this moment where he's going to transition a topic,
okay,
this is a place where you want him to think about how he's about to transition the topic. So, and a lot of times you want him to think about what the person he's talking to just said, right? So yes, I'm paired with Kate Walsh, the healer, the daughter. So what does he feel about Kate Walsh? Does he know Kate Walsh? Does oh, Kate Walsh. Like that might be the inner thought you have him think like, oh, Kate Walsh, that's interesting. Or like, oh, I didn't realize that he could be separate from them. Sure. Or like, how does he feel about the fact that that Zimmer's a handler, right? Yeah. That may be something you want to be
Yeah.
like, you know, I mean, being a handler is a good gig. That might want to be like, or like being a handler would change things for me. But you want him processing the conversation that's happening right now.
Okay.
And so with that whole like not saying your theme of like not saying the quiet stuff out loud versus saying the quiet stuff out loud and how that like interacts with people's function, right? Like how that gets people in trouble or helps them. This character is a great character because he's only going to think about right now. And he's only going to talk about right now. And in general, you want Cal to be that character that like says what he thinks.
Right.
What he says. So
yeah.
you might actually do that on occasion. Now, I wouldn't give Cal an inner thought every exchange.
Sure.
I would give Cal an inner thought in topic changes. When the topic's going to shift, Cal gets an inner thought. When Cal is like waiting with dead time, Cal gets an inner thought, right? Like in the early section where Cal's just sitting in that office by himself, that's where you want to give him inner thoughts, right? And then here in the middle of this conversation, he's going to be focused on the conversation. So you only want to give him a thought when the direction of things change. That's when you want Cal to think for a minute about how the direction's changing and then talk about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay. Talk to me about Scout's voice. Let's talk about the difference in inner thoughts.
Can I ask one question before I forget? Because I was toying with this, because like I picture like Cal being pretty much in control, he's the level-headed guy, but everyone has something that sneaks out of them in a way. So like he says something, that man can't keep his damn mouth shut. Like I think I pictured him kind of like when he starts swearing or starts to like, that's almost like him, there's a crack in that in that shield. Or does that, like, I kind of wanted that to be a little foreshadowing, like if he swears, then that's like a little crack in that he,
you're gonna have to do something to him to make him crack.
Okay. All right.
If you want a character that's an oak and a pillar,
yeah,
he needs to experience some level of trauma to crack.
Okay.
And then when he cracks, it needs to be a big deal.
Okay.
So going back to the Cal, I'm just going to keep leaning. Does the Captain America illustration work for Cal? Is that a good?
It does. And I mean, he's a little less, rigid. I mean, he's playful when he's with Scout,
Sure. Well, and that's a modulation, right? Like when he gets with somebody he cares about, he's going to be playful and fun.
Yeah.
So with him, a little like when Captain America is with like Black Widow in later movies.
Yeah, sure.
Right. They get playful and they joke with each other, and because they've kind of earned each other's respect, but he's still, tried and true. Does that make sense? He's still who he is all the time.
And he's a little playful with Zimmer. He actually is really close to Captain Rex. They're gonna be in crew later. And so that's why I didn't make their exchanges so formal, because
and it works.
Guys forever.
Yeah, you feel like they're friends.
Okay.
It works. Yeah. I would never have him talk badly about somebody. No. Unless the person's there. Right? Like, so this line, Rex, that man keep his damn mouth shut. He's never going to do that unless the person's there.
So like,
Now, if Rex is in the room, that's different.
Right.
He might tease Rex if Rex is in the room.
Right.
But he's not going to poke at somebody who's not in the room.
Yeah.
Because there's like a dishonor to that. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Okay. You don't ever want him talking behind somebody's back. And when it comes to like cursing or him like showing a crack, I think about, just using that Captain America illustration, you think about that second Avengers movie. It starts off where they're in a big like firefight and something happens. And I think he says, "What the hell?" Like Captain America says, "What the hell?" And it's a joke in the team. Oh, it's so funny, right? Like, all of a sudden the like arrogant, confident guy in Iron Man is making fun of him for cursing, right? Like it's a
Right.
big deal. So that's how you want him to crack. When he
Yep.
cracks, it's got to be a big thing because his armor needs to be impenetrable. So when it does penetrate, it's big. It'll also make his vulnerability with Scout feel more vulnerable.
Okay.
So if
Well,
you maintain his voice in like normal circumstances, when you modulate, the modulate feels like a bigger change. So his
sure.
vulnerability will feel more open. I would say with Scout, he's willing to talk about other people. With
Yeah.
Scout, he's willing to express opinions that he doesn't usually. So this line, Rex, that man can't keep his mouth shut, that's an inner thought.
Okay, that works because I wanted him to kind of mutter it as almost it like slipped out, but that makes more sense
Put
if
it in
that
his
was the
brain.
inner thought. Yeah.
Yeah. He needs to say something though, right? So like
Yeah.
Captain Rex informed me you do have feelings for Scout, and that in fact you were just about to make your feelings known. Inner thought. Rex needs to keep his damn mouth shut.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exterior vocalization. Rex knows me well.
Yep.
Right? Like
Okay.
that kind, and then
Yeah,
you
the
start to get the
armor.
play of like, this is my armor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Okay, so Scout's voice, you were
Yeah.
asking.
So talk to me about Scout's personality.
So Scout is sort of his opposite in that she's late. She kind of like she's more of a, I think she's introverted in a way that she really feels comfortable with Cal,
Mm-hmm.
but isn't quite sure of herself in other settings. And her whole journey is in my world, there's superheroes and she's a keeper of body.
Okay.
And supposedly they have strength. They're like tanks. They're like bulletproof and they can throw heavy objects, blah, blah, blah. But she has no strength in the beginning. She's
Okay.
not confident. She doesn't like to make decisions. She's paralyzed by making decisions. She really has, since her trauma of losing her parents, that's when she stopped scouting, let Cal take the lead, and just wants him to take care of her, basically. She
Okay.
just is fine with him being her handler, making the decisions, and just,
Gotcha. So she's a little more emotionally messy.
she is.
She's a little, she's more scatterbrained.
Yeah, because she like if there's a meeting, Cal's 20 minutes early. Scout got caught like trying to catch a bug outside and look at it. She's more,
Gotcha.
and she's late, and then like, yeah,
Is
that's her.
she more nerdy or compassionate?
I would say probably both, a little bit of both. I think she's compassionate and
You got to
sweet.
pick one. Is she
Okay.
nerdy or compassionate?
All right, compassionate.
Okay. The reason I ask is because characters that are emotional messes, and that like a character like Cal needs to want to take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, but in order for Cal to want to take care of her, there has to be something about her that he really likes. Right. So, for example, like, so the emotional messiness, right? Like it becomes charming if she's super compassionate and caring for other people.
Yeah.
If she's the woman adopting the stray cat all the time,
Yeah.
and taking care of the homeless person, and yeah, she's a mess herself, but it's actually kind of charming because she's so busy thinking about how everybody else is and feeling bad about how everybody else is, then that's somebody Cal's going to be like, oh wow. If she's so, and I'm assuming they're your romantic pairing for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
she's nerdy in that like she's constantly distracted by the intelligent thoughts she's having, she's constantly distracted by her curiosity of the world, right? Like she's wandering around. She's late for a meeting because she saw a bug she's never seen before. She had to catch it in a jar. She needs to examine it later in her house and maybe write a thesis paper about it. Right?
Okay.
Like
All right.
that's a
Yeah.
different Scout.
Yeah.
Does that
So
make
I
sense?
think that totally makes sense. So I think she's more compassionate. Like she was late for the meeting because she was
Gotcha.
helping an older woman cross the street and then
Okay.
got talking to her. Yeah. Mhm.
So we need to express using her inner thoughts. You want to express her like messiness and kind of worry and anxiety.
Yeah.
Her inner thoughts need to be about feelings. They need to be about how she's feeling about things. They need to express her feelings. Like, so let's pretend for a second that Zimmer is saying these things to her about Cal. The same, and let's like echo that in. Okay, so it's more than that. Zimmer folded his arms across his chest. A handler must provide and protect while remaining objective. You can't express any personal feelings that may cloud your judgment. Her inner thought might be, oh shit, well, I'm already in trouble here.
Right.
Right? Like or
No, she would be like, how can you ask me to do this? There's
yeah,
no
like
way I'm qualified for this. I don't, it would just be
yeah,
rambling like
it's the
I
rambling, it's the more
screaming.
sentences.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, but it's about how she feels about what he said, not processing the moment, but processing like what's going to happen because of that, consequences, future things, specifically about her own emotions around it. Right. And
Right.
then Cal here tries to swallow the lump that started in the form of his throat. That's a very armored guy response, right? Like he's
Right.
not going to speak until he actually has something to say.
Right.
She's going to talk,
Oh yeah.
right? Like, well,
Well,
you got the wrong girl because I can't keep anything inside, right?
yeah.
Like, and then Rex could be like, Captain Rex informed me that you have feelings for Cal. And in fact, you're about to make those feelings known. She's also going to have a thought about Rex. Like, what else did Rex tell him about me? How
Right.
much does he actually know? I need to have a
Yep.
conversation with Rex later. And then she's going to be like, I mean, yeah, that's totally true. But I didn't know if I'm not doing it right away. I might do
Right.
it later. Right. Like, so, but you can feel that like you can start to feel this separation and how you're using their inner thoughts. She's going to have a lot more of them. They're going to be about the emotions of the moment. They're going to debate what's going on. They're going to worry about things, right? Like, and then her voice is just going to be a continuation of those inner thoughts. His inner thought is going to be less, and it's going to be about him processing what's happening right there. And his voice is going to be that check on inner thoughts. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I'm wondering though, how can I show, because part of her lack of strength is Scout doesn't say what she's feeling. She's still, they're similar in that where she has a ton of feelings and emotions, but she's at this point, her
Okay.
journey is to start to speak up.
So
Tell
she's
me how
not,
you're feeling.
gotcha.
You know?
So emotional messy might have been the wrong way for me to qualify her. So she's a mess on the inside, but on the
Yeah.
outside, she kind of holds it together.
She wants to hide behind like her male peers. Like
Okay.
she really leans on Rex. And
Gotcha. So scratch what I said about her voice, because I wasn't considering her shy and introverted. I had left that out. So
yeah.
the inner thought needs to be the same. Rambly, lots of words, multiple sentences for inner thoughts, going in multiple directions. Her exterior thoughts need to be, her exterior vocalizations need to be very different. They need to be one sentence, short and clipped, that don't express much.
Yeah.
So, and they can totally contradict each other, right? Like, so in this Rex example, her inner thought might be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that to him. I'm going to, like, Rex and I are going to have a talk later. That jerk, what else did he tell him? And then her exterior thought's going to be like,
Okay.
yeah, okay. like, haha, or you might just have her go, haha, right? Like that kind of exterior laugh to, but yes, if she's got that introverted shyness, then you're right. She needs to have that pull back in her inner thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. When she's with Cal, you need to modulate.
Yeah.
So when they're together, her inner thoughts need to be her exterior thoughts.
And that happens, except when it comes, they both, what's going to happen to them is they both don't talk about, they repress their true feelings for each other, like their love feelings.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're not playful and like that.
No.
Comes
Yeah.
out,
Their relationship needs to be focused on the other people and the
test,
circumstances around them. Yeah.
What's going to test them later is sort of the shadow agent, third piece of the love trial that's going to break in and threaten their love because they don't speak up,
Yeah.
and so they may lose it because of this other person that's going to arrive. And so there's another scene where they're walking and you can see the playfulness, and she does open up a little and he does with her because they're trying to, but they can't quite express their love for each other because she's afraid and he's bound by this duty as a handler to not do.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a good, when you talk about the maturation of their arc, the natural progress of these characters, right? Like the natural progress of a Cal type character is that the mission he's devoted himself to needs to betray him. So what he thinks is pure and right and just needs to turn out to be a little sinister. And that's where you break a character like Cal, because he's basing himself on like the righteousness of his cause. And then when he starts to learn that it is not as clean as he thought it was, and he's forced to question who he is, right? Like that's the natural character arc for him. And he'll come out of that character arc a little more cynical in a healthy way. Not as much a company man.
Right.
So ideally in his character arc, you're going to have something happen with Scout. They're going to send her somewhere. They're going to ask her to do something that makes Cal question the people that he and Scout work for. That makes him go like, wait a second. Why is this happening?
Right.
And he'll be forced to choose between the company, the Sentinels, and his relationship with Scout. And in the end, he'll choose Scout. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For Scout's character, you're going to need to push her in a place where she has to stand on her own.
Yeah. And that's, she is going to have to lose everyone around her at some point. Not trying to give too much away, but like not in like total literal terms, but like there's a point where she's got to do something by herself. And she's going to save the day, make those decisions, find her strength, and challenge the villain without Cal, without Captain Rex, without her crew, without anything but her.
Yeah.
And
and so, the natural bend for her arc based on the personality you're describing, and if you want to bring that love triangle into it, is that Cal needs to be pushing her to stand on her own. Cal needs to be telling her, you can stand on your own, you can do this. There needs to be another figure that is going to be attractive to her, because that figure offers to her what Cal is refusing, which is, you can stand behind me. You don't have to stand on your own. I'll do it for you. Right?
Yeah.
So
his is Gunner, and he's like this. He's the opposite of Cal. He's pretty flashy. He says it all. He's Mr. Charming. He's Mr. like, why aren't you? I'll take care of you. Don't worry. Like where Cal does try to say, you need to start making decisions. You're totally capable.
I believe in you. You can do this.
And she's like freaking in the act one, like, I don't want to make decisions. Why are you doing this to me? And he's like, you can do it.
That's funny. You're writing the Tony Stark Captain America contrast. The Iron Man Captain America contrast. What's great about Gunner and Cal that you're describing is they're going to share confidence and competency. So they both need to be very competent. They both need to be very confident. They both need to be able to like handle themselves. They both need to look disciplined, right? Like in some ways they need to look the same in their personality, but then where Cal is going to have that modesty and that like self-reliance based on the cause he's fighting for.
Yeah.
Gunner needs to think he's the bomb.
Oh, he does.
Yeah,
He like,
and that's
there's the whole scene where he walks in, he's like, what's up? You know,
Yeah.
hey ladies, like he's Mr.
Mr. Play. And
Charm.
you got to make sure that he's not sleaze,
No.
because there's a line between Mr. Charm and sleaze. He can't be sleaze because then he's not attractive anymore.
Yeah.
But you know, if you're offering him as this like, you know, kind of playboy with a heart, he'll come out. Where in the natural plot arc of that character in comparison to Cal, he's gonna know that the organization they're working for isn't up to par, isn't like clean and spotless, and he's okay with it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where you come with the separation between him and Cal, is that Cal is not okay with it and he's fine with it.
Well,
he's like, yeah, this is how this works.
There's a plot twist with Gunner because he's going to be a shadow agent. You think he's good.
Perfect.
Working for the bad guys, and he really tricks Scout, and then he's the one that takes everything away.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, honey.
You need him trying to recruit first.
Yeah.
So before he takes everything away from her, he needs to be trying to recruit her, because that's, you know, and he needs to try to recruit. He doesn't need to try to recruit Cal because he knows Cal's unrecruitable.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Zimmer's voice. And you may not want to change Zimmer, but I just want to give you some options in these, like, because you're writing a space opera. So you're going to be building, world building is just part of your game, right? Like this is part of your groove. In sci-fi, this is what we do. You've got this character in Zimmer. I'm looking for where you initially describe him. Dun, dun, dun. Here it is. Nope. It's before that. Where to go? Scott Zimmer's office suite, on the other hand, was most. No, is that it? No. Social walls, the memories. No. Sorry, I'll find it in a second. You have a place where you like describe Zimmer. Is this it? Yes, there we go. Zimmer fixed them both a drink and handed Cal his, and then sat on the edge of his large mahogany desk. Usually a man of few words and even less patience. So that's a powerful description. A man of few words and less patience. You're describing a hard ass.
Not doing it.
Yeah, you're describing a hard ass here, right? Like Zimmer is a like, I'm going to tell you what to do and you're going to go do it. Zimmer always got to the point and preferred to keep interactions with others about business, not pleasure.
Yeah.
Which is great because he's fixing him a drink. So you know that like you're doing this great thing where you're like, oh, this is who Zimmer usually is, but right now we're in a little bit, something's a little bit different. At the same time, you got to keep his voice tight and short.
I know.
And the problem is you're trying to world build with him.
Yeah.
You can't world build with a character that don't talk.
Yeah, I saw your edits and I was like, oh yes, that makes so much more sense. I had him really going on when.
Yeah. So like, for example, this is not for you. This is more for the listeners, just so they know what we're talking about. You have this like conversation, you know, Cal says, I don't like the sound of this. You say, I want to talk to you about Marlene Mason, right? Like already for a man of few words, that's too many words.
Right.
He's just going to say Marlene Mason. Cal said up straight, Scout, what about her? And then you had, why did you give her that nickname when you were kids? Right? This is like that kind of curious question is somebody who's like laid back and we're like, oh, we're going to shoot the shit here for a minute. But you want him talking to the point, talking about business. You gave her that nickname when you were kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like get to the point.
Yeah.
Cal exhales, he thinks for a minute, right? Here is funny because you actually give him, he thought for a moment before he answered, but you don't give me his inner thought. You just give me his answer. You got to give me his inner thought. She was little,
No.
we were warriors. She came to see if there was danger ahead. I call her Scout once and the name stuck. And then you had Zimmer saying, but everything changed for both of you when your parents died in the Great War. Right? Like you are world building here. I
Right.
know it. The reader's gonna know it. We all know what you're doing.
Right.
You're giving me a backstory for Cal.
Sure.
What Zimmer's actually gonna say is like, then your parents died in the Great War and things changed.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's not gonna phrase it as a question. He's gonna give it as a statement. He already knows. He's trying to get to the point. Scout
Right.
changed, yes, changed after me.
Mhm.
Both of you losing your parents at a traumatic event, but it's even more impacting her. So
Yeah.
you can see how I'm just like trimming words to keep him to the point.
Yeah.
As we get,
Now I'm freaking because I gotta go back through book 1.
no, you don't. Do not touch book 1. Do not touch it.
No, I won't. And
Okay.
I don't think he's pretty similar. It's not like he's like,
No.
people are gonna think he's a different person.
And I'm
So,
talking to you more in general about world building because you're gonna have to do this a lot. You're gonna have to give
sure.
backstory. You're gonna have to talk about different worlds they're going to. You're gonna have to describe different ships, all that kind of stuff. When you're world building, don't do it with a character that doesn't talk a lot. Right?
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
So my suggestion for you here is give him a secretary or assistant.
Sure.
And give him a little dude that's mousy with a notebook and a pencil and glasses who can interject these moments of world building that you want. So
Sure.
for example, that piece we just read, Marlene Mason, Cal set up Scout. What about her? Have the little dude say, you gave her that nickname, right? That's what I heard. You gave her that nickname. And then Cal can inhale and say like, yeah, we played games, everything. And then you can have Zimmer be like, I need to talk to you about your relationship with her changing, because he's trying to get to the point. And then you can have the little guy say like, yeah, and it's changed before because you guys were close. And then the Great War happened and your parents died, right? Like, so you can get that guy world building where you have your two stoic firm characters trying to have a conversation. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And now I'm picturing Zimmer being totally irritated and be like, get out of here, or maybe
100%.
Can we world build a little and then he just kicks them out and says, I can't deal with you right now, please.
Possibly, or he just tells him to shut it, right? Like or he can
shut up and take notes. Yeah.
Set it up at the beginning. When Cal comes in, he introduces himself and Zimmer can be like, yeah, the Sentinels have decided that I need a personal assistant. This is Chucky. And right now we've introduced Chucky. We've got some comic relief in the room, which is nice. But a lot of space operas have these characters because world building is so necessary. So like Star Wars has C-3PO.
Right.
C-3PO plays no role in that show at all, except to explain to the viewer what is happening, right? Like that's all he does. So they land, he and R2-D2 get fired down to a desert planet. They stop. You see a like Jawa thing coming toward them, and C-3PO is like, oh no, the Jawas, they steal robots and take them for parts, right? Like that's his job, is to tell you what's happening. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you used to be a Jedi Master. My database says that you were once the trainer of Jedi, right? Like it's that kind of like, he's just there to tell you what's going on. In space operas, these characters are great because they're kind of funny, right? Like, and they never involve themselves in the plot. They're literally just like tag-alongs. But the point of them is to be like, oh my gosh, this ship is amazing. I love this ship. I read about this ship in blah, blah, blah. Does it have a quantum such and such drive? And then Cal needs to be like, yes, it does. I love quantum such and such drives. They're so great. Like, it's that kind of like, they go 5 parsecs in 2 hours. Like, yeah, yes, Chucky. That is what this ship does. Right?
Okay, so you just gave me an idea, because I do actually, there's a character who's going to be in all of them, and he was in book 1, so we know him. So I'm not creating a new person, but his name is Gary. He's the emotional robot. He looks like Will Ferrell. He dresses like wears like a Hawaiian shirt and a fanny pack and Birkenstocks with socks, and like, but he morphs into a battle bot. But he
Yeah.
is that person, and he's like would be a natural part of Zimmer's world. Like maybe Gary's practicing, like he's applying to be an assistant robot as well as the battle bot, and he's going to try taking notes, and he would be the one that would perfectly
Put
be
him in
like,
this room. Put
okay.
him in this room. Have him oversharing information that Zimmer
And,
doesn't
and that's
necessarily
what
want
he
shared.
does in book one. He
Yeah.
rambles on about things and then gets emotional, and
Yeah.
people are constantly like, Gary,
Yeah.
calm down. Like, okay. So I
So
think
like,
that would work there.
yeah. So like right here, Cal threw his drink down the back of his throat. He knew that Zimmer was referring to, he had hoped he would have found out before. All of that inner thought, her new abilities,
Right. Okay.
right? Her new
Yeah.
abilities, you mean?
Yeah.
Zimmer says, that's exactly what I mean. How long have you known? Right? Zimmer wants to get to the point. So like, if you've got a character that wants to get to the point, this is how this conversation is going to go. Cal's going to come in. Zimmer's going to go, you are close to Marlene. Marlene has these powers now. I know that you know that. She needs a handler. You're the best one for it.
Okay.
That's
All
what
right.
Zimmer wants, right? That's Zimmer's conversation. So the rest of this, like getting into Cal's backstory and who they are,
Here.
that's
Yeah.
what you need Gary to do. So like
Right.
this part here, like, this, like, how long have you known? And then you have Cal saying that she's a keeper of the body, right? You're getting very artful way to get in what she is, but
Right.
not necessarily part of Cal's voice, right? Not something Cal would necessarily say out loud. So that's what you want Gary to say, right? Like, her new
Right.
abilities, you mean? Gary be like, how long have you known that she's a keeper of the body? And have you seen her start
Yeah.
to use your strength yet? Oh my gosh, it's going to be so cool to see, right? Like getting that Gary character to tell this.
Okay. That's perfect.
Details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. And then down here, you have him being like, keeper of the body manifest women through women's ages or through trauma, right? Like you're describing when she's going to manifest her abilities.
Mhm.
That's Gary, right? Like keeper of the body. Oh my gosh, how long have you known? Has she started to manifest yet? You know, it only comes on with age or trauma. And Cal and Zimmer can both be, Cal can be like, uh-huh. And then Zimmer can like shake his head and like
Right.
try to move the conversation forward.
Yeah. And then eventually just getting Gary, just maybe they turn him off or something. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
That's
that'd be
perfect.
fantastic. If you
Yeah,
could turn
they
him
just-
off, it'd be great. Especially if you can turn him off and he doesn't know he's been turned off. That's some great comic relief there in the middle of the room. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I think that's a great idea.
okay.
Okay.
What I love about what you're doing is that you're world building and dialogue. This is great. One of the biggest mistakes I think we make when we're writing fantasy worlds is that we try to world build outside of dialogue. So what we try to do is we have like 7 paragraphs of world building. Now it's not impossible, right? Like, recently I was reading PD James's I can't remember the name of it. It's the one where the world has stopped having children for a while. I can't remember what it's called. And her whole first chapter is first person world building in a diary. And it's just somebody talking. It's just somebody writing about the state of the world. And,
Right.
James is such a strong writer that she can pull that off.
Right.
You can stay engaged in like 9 pages of prose. I think I counted before somebody talks, and she pulls it off. But, the question I always ask myself is like, am I PD James?
No, I'm going to just let y'all know that I'm not.
Yeah. Can I pull that off? And 9 times out of 10, we're like, no, I am not PD James. I can likely not pull that off. So you got to put it in dialogue so it's more engaging. Does that make sense?
And I tend to, part of me doesn't know how much, because what I want you to do is turn the page. I want that fast pacing. I want to end and you want to be like, okay, one more chapter. So when I'm reading, I tend to skip paragraphs.
Yep. We all do.
So I don't write too much setting. I don't want to like settings hard for me because I want to be like, here's a house and there's some grass. Now let's get into it.
Yeah. And so I can give you so writing that dialogue centric. So the thing that's great about writing dialogue centric is that it does keep that pace moving, right? Like we read dialogue faster because it's more engaging to our imagination. It makes us feel more present in the moment of the scene. So yes, to like keeping as like, you're going to have paragraphs.
Oh yeah.
You can't get away from it. You got to describe where they are. You're going to have paragraphs. But keeping them tight. And like I say, like my general rule of thumb is no more than 3 to 5 paragraphs of prose at a time.
Sure.
If you can keep it under 3 to 5 paragraphs of prose at a time, you're doing good. So I want a conversation, then like 3 paragraphs of prose, and then a conversation, and then like 2 paragraphs of prose, and then a conversation, and then like a little bit of prose. Does that make sense? So keeping it in that conversation as much as possible. What you want to look for as to like where you put that prose is you want to read through your conversation and find the natural turning points, changes of topic, where like the topic is going to shift a little bit to where they're talking about something else, or changes in emotional tone where you need to pause to kind of like sit in that emotional tone for a second. That's a good place to have like a paragraph of prose just to kind of stretch things out a little bit. So like in here, for example, you have them talking about in general his relationship with Scout. And then they're going to transition to talking about Scout's powers. In that transition between talking about Cal's relationship with Scout and talking about Scout's powers, that's where you can put a paragraph of prose. Because it's a natural place for the reader to take a mental breath and it doesn't break up the flow of the conversation.
Okay.
Does that make sense? And then they're going to get into Zimmer as a handler. That like shift in conversation is another place where you can drop a paragraph of prose because there's a natural break. The reader is already going to take a mental breath in the transition between the two things.
Sure. Yeah. Now, like when you're starting is like a new, I've always heard you have to anchor each scene. So like if you're changing setting or time of day, you have to do that in the beginning, correct? Or not necessarily?
Well, so
at the beginning of the scene, I mean, like right away, so people know it's night, you're on this planet. Or can you do more dialogue and then say?
Let's distinguish between breaking a scene and breaking a chapter.
Okay.
Because we tend to write, as modern writers, we tend to write a chapter at a time. And we think of each chapter as a scene. But if you're trying to write engaging dialogue that hooks people, like you're trying to write an engaging story that hooks people, you want that, like, you don't want each scene to be this, like, you don't want each chapter to start a new scene. Because like you're saying, you want them to finish the chapter and want to turn the page to keep going. So you almost want to start breaking chapters mid-scene if you want to keep them engaged. So yes, at the beginning of each scene, you have to have some kind of establishing prose to like set up where they are. You need the scenery, you need to know where they are. We need to know how we as a reader feel about where they are, right? It can happen through dialogue, but it needs to happen early. We need to know who is in the room being in quotes, like what characters are in this scene. Who am I going to have to talk to? Because we hate being, like, as a reader, you hate being surprised by the ghost third person. So you've been having a 2-person conversation and then Red said, and you're like, wait a second, you didn't tell me Red was in the room. That's not okay, right? Like we got to know who's in the room up front. So having that kind of like setting the scene is important in between scenes. Just make sure that's not always happening at the top of each chapter.
Sure.
Because what you're doing is you're giving your reader a natural stopping point. So part of what you may want to do is like write your scene and then decide where is the break in this scene that makes the reader go, wait, what just happened? And make that your chapter break.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Oh, yeah. I have a hand in my thing. Yeah. Sorry. Life with children in a basement. Yeah. So, all right. Anything else you wanted to talk about the piece? I think we covered almost
Yeah,
everything.
no, that was great.
Okay.
That's so helpful. This is
Awesome.
beyond. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing this with us. It was
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thanks for letting me soak up knowledge from your majestic brain.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting word, interesting definition of majestic. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and you and I can chat a little bit more.